Right, I'm going to make a bit of a start. Okay. To be fair, it was supposed to be Henry starting, but rather than wait too long. So we've been asked to look, initially the request was to kind of talk about date nights and talk about kind of our marriage to a great extent. And then the message came in kind of, could we also look at the marriage vows a little? And so last night, Henry and I sat down and we were like, let's remind ourselves what the marriage vows were, because not sure that we particularly looked at them in detail. I mean, obviously we won't hold them, but to actually sit down and look at what the words of the marriage vows are is not something that we necessarily do regularly. So shall I read through all of it?
Yes.
So I'm going to do it from my point of view. So I, Elizabeth, take Henry to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. According to God's holy law, in the presence of God, I make this vow. And Henry and I made that vow nearly 10 years ago. It doesn't feel that long, but it is 10 years this year, come September. And we've looked at those vows and kind of a little bit more about what do they mean from a biblical perspective. Where can we find the basis of some of those parts of the vows within the Bible?
So, like Steve said last week, when you get married, you become one flesh. And Matthew 18, Jesus says, therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. That kind of brings in the to have and to hold, because you basically are one. So you can't let go of yourself. So you need to be able to hold your partner close. And then just like Steve said from Ephesians, I'll read that again today. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it, cherishes it, just as Christ does the church.
Now, the marriage vows say for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. And that part of the husbands loving their wives as their own bodies, we accept our own bodies, we accept ourselves for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. And that's how we should be living with our partners in a marriage. And I think a lot of what we say today doesn't just apply to marriage, it applies to relationships, whether that's between parents and children, or between brothers and sisters, or brothers and sisters in Christ. We should be cherishing one another. Yeah. Marriage is that cleaving together of two people, but a lot of the practicalities of having a good marriage also apply to having good relationships in families, within friendships. Yeah. So just to kind of highlight that this isn't just for the married couples out there. Now we talked about to have and to hold, and it being two people coming together. And in marriage, for us, that has become a practical thing in many terms. So we looked at how our marriage is successful because we work together, because we plan things together, because we share things together. So the marriage vows talk about it being for richer, for poorer. And in our relationship, that's been interesting at times. I mean, when we first got married, I was the main breadwinner. And that was the case until about 18 months ago. And that's always been one of those things that's we came together as one, and we came together in our finances as one. Yeah. And when we first got together, Henry discovered I'm a squirrel. Our financial advisor described me as a squirrel. I like to put a little bit of money away here and there, take a little bit off the mortgage, or put a little bit into savings, and that is my habit, and that's not a bad thing. But it's something that Henry and I have had to talk about, because sometimes I won't spend money on things that actually, it might be a luxury, it might be something that we don't necessarily need, but actually we're one, we're together, and actually we deserve it. We've earned it, and God has blessed us with these finances, and therefore we need to use them wisely, but not deny ourselves. And that's one of the things that I think we've worked together to
I think
recognize.
actually working together and organizing something can be as fun as going to the cinema, because you achieve something. If you're planning a DIY project or planning where you're going to go on holiday, it's actually quite satisfying to manage those things and work together. I think that in itself is a form of, it's not a date night, but it's something that is rewarding, that you both work together and achieve.
And in terms of working together as well, we work, I'm sure everybody has their own diaries and their own interests and their own activities, but I think in a marriage, it's very important to work together so that, like I said earlier, in terms of the ladies' event, I think I need to speak to Henry because I've already got a ladies' day planned. So I need to be fair to Henry to give him the opportunity to have his time with his mates. Yeah. But it's about recognizing that there are times when we want to do things together, but God has made us unique. God has made us individuals. And actually, it's right that we pursue our own individual interests as well. And for me, lockdown has been really difficult because my individual interest is go guiding, as many of you know. And pretty much all of that stopped. Yes, there were a few meetings, but for me, the weekly seeing the girls stopped completely because my rainbows and technology probably wasn't going to work particularly well. So I didn't meet with them. And whereas Henry and his interest in choir continued, and he had that every week. And that, I think, was a difference between us, which for me made lockdown more difficult. For Henry, I think it gave him a release. It gave him something to focus on. The other thing that we've had to work together on, and this is something that came up in the marriage preparation course, is the difference between families. Henry's family is very family orientated. Everybody comes together. Spending time together is really important to his family. It's important to my family, but on our terms, whereas I think in the past, there have been times when Henry's parents, or particularly Henry's dad, is kind of going, when am I going to see the girls? And it's like, you saw them yesterday. My mum hasn't seen them for 2 weeks. So sometimes that can be a challenge. And that's where working together is important, because we are one unit. And actually making sure that we spend that time together, just the four of us, is just as important as spending the time with the wider family, with the grandparents and the aunts and uncles and that kind of thing. Should we go on?
Yeah. So why should husbands and wives love each other? It sounds like it says in the vows you should love and cherish, but why should we love? Sounds like an obvious question, but one of the answers is that actually we need each other. So in Genesis 2, the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him." And there's a kind of whole, I have only just started considering this in the sense that the Trinity, the Godhead, is three individuals who all honor, love, and serve one another. And so we are made in God's image. Therefore, we need to be loving the people around us. And we are created to love. That's basically because we're made in God's image. So I think there's a deeper mystery there, which is all about living in community. And I think that's probably for another sermon. But basically, husbands and wives need to love each other because one, we need to. Two, God is love. It says in 1 John 4 verse 7, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God." So as a human being, we need to love people. That's just basically part of who we're created to be.
Now, one of the ways that Henry and I have obviously shown our love for one another is to spend time with each other. And we talked briefly last week about date nights. And because I've got the list of all the different date nights we've done over the last, what did I say? It's about since 2014, so not quite the whole 10 years. We kind of had a look at what the themes are. So the most popular, which I'm sure won't be a surprise to the Burnham Community Church, is eating out.
Go out. Like yesterday, we went to the Greek restaurant. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yes, I did.
A mixed grill for £48.
With a starter and a pudding and a glass of wine as well. The most memorable for me was back in 2014 when Hannah was little. We had a date night decision box, which I'd given Henry for Valentine's, I think it was. And it got all sorts of different ideas. And I'd pulled out for me to plan a secret for Henry. And because I was breastfeeding, because Hannah was little, this one took a bit of planning. And that is that I took him to the Harvest Home at East Brent. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic. It was so different. It was something that we wouldn't normally have done. And it had taken quite a commitment from me to do it. So that is one of my most memorable ones.
I remember planning on our first wedding anniversary, meeting Liz from work. We got on a train to Bath. We went to a restaurant and because it's paper you have to give on your first anniversary, we made paper aeroplanes and see how far we could throw them in the park.
I think it was pretty rubbish because I think it was wet. I can't remember.
It was September and it was wet. But it's because I think if you do try and do something that's a surprise, you have to do a bit more planning, and that's why that's been remembered by me. So
our most unusual is a tour of Arnesvale Cemetery in Bristol.
Oh, that's
just really interesting. Really interesting to see the kind of different people that are buried there and the stories behind who's there and what have you. So if you get the chance, I recommend it. They do different types of tour around Arnesvale. So if you're into spooky stuff, they'll do a spooky one. But ours was more a kind of factual, historical figures kind of tour. And who was it that I purposely wanted to see?
George Muller?
It might have been Muller. There's definitely a significant Christian person. I think it was Muller. And an unexpected or not so successful, we'd booked to go and see a theatre production called Death and Treason, Rhyme and Reason, which was supposed to be all about
nursery rhymes.
Yeah,
where the
source of nursery rhymes and where they come from. And
yeah.
Thankfully, we'd gone for a meal beforehand because that is the bit that was good. We saw the first half of this play and it was a bit...
It was very gory.
Yeah, it was gory. It was a bit pagan. And we kind of got to half time and went, should we go home? Yeah. And we'd left. So if that kind of thing happens, don't be frightened to be honest to your partner. I mean, to be fair, when we were courting, our second...
cinema trip.
We went to the cinema the second time we met together, and again after that one, neither of us had really reviewed the film that well, and I think there was a little bit of swearing and stuff in it. And after about 20 minutes, we were like, "Don't want to watch this. Should we go?" So we learned to be honest with each other from the beginning. The most anticipated, the one that we most looked forward to, was seeing Warhorse in Bristol, which was absolutely amazing. And my favourite, the best home cooked food was very recent. It was my birthday and we cooked choux buns, the first time I'd ever done choux pastry.
Yeah, again, that's working together. It's something a bit intellectual, but it's it's as satisfying to get a reward if it works, and it did work. The pastry puffed up, and it's quite interesting.
And your best home cooked, Henry?
Oh, yeah, we did try and make a 3-course meal as well. We made this pate with smoked haddock, and then we did a duck, and then we did something chocolate for pudding. So again, it was more than just 1 course. It was 3 courses, and that was interesting. So that was nice to do that.
So that's an idea of some of the things that we've been doing during our date nights. But actually the question comes, why are they important? Why is it important to actually spend that time with your partner or whoever it is? And for us, a lot of them are about sitting down together. They're about having a meal together or going for a walk together, and that gives you time to be in a receptive frame of mind, because your focus is completely on your partner, on your husband or on your wife. And so you can listen to them more actively and have an opportunity to talk, whether that's a serious talk about something that's bothering you, or whether it's just actually sharing your love for them and how much you care about them. It depends on what's happening at the time in your life, but it's important to be able to give the time to focus on your marriage and value it. Yeah. It's also a shared experience. So like when we sat down to prepare this talk, we had a lovely evening on Tuesday talking through all the different date nights that we've had and our experiences and our memories, and just so much came out of just sitting down and talking about all of them on Tuesday night to share that those shared experiences that we will draw upon in the future. And I know that in the hard times, if I look in my list, there are periods where we've gone a few months and we've not had a date night, and I look back at them and I go, we need to do that. That's where our marriage is strengthened, is when we spend that time together. And it also kind of breaks the mold, like on those times where we're going through a rough period, when we're having difficulties, it kind of resets things. It helps for us to kind of go, actually, we've not spent that time together. We've kind of drifted a little bit apart. We're got our own focuses, our own attention, and it brings us back together to go, actually, we're one. And it's important that we remember we're one. And we come together in those shared experiences and that time together to talk.
I think it also takes you out of the identity that you've given yourself. So you might say, well, I do this Monday to Friday, and then on Saturday we'll do this, and then we do this on Sunday. But if you do something different, like, I don't know, when ice skating or something, that you just get a different idea of who you are and what you can offer, and it takes you out of being the same old people that you think you've grown to be. You can expand on who you are, and it's very important if you've got kids that if you've got a babysitter, then you can do things that you don't have to do with the kids. So then you get like walking around Bristol yesterday, there's lots of people in their 20s and 30s, and it's just made you think there's a whole different world out there. And we were kind of part of it for a bit, so it was interesting.
Henry actually highlighted on Tuesday when we were talking about our date nights, there was one particular day where the children were being looked after by grandparents, and we'd planned to do DIY or something around the house, because it was like, we can't do this with the kids around, we'll do this. And we'd been a little bit bickery to one another, and on that occasion we said, actually, let's not do what we planned. And we went to Breen Leisure Park and behaved like teenagers for the afternoon. Went on all the roller coasters and rides, but it was that kind of doing something different that gave us that, relaxed us, and meant that we were sharing that experience together, and that made a massive difference to us then sitting down later on to talk about what the difficulties had been, what we were struggling with, and why we were struggling.
Good.
Right, so there's another part of the wedding service where they say, for example, Henry, will you take Liz to be your wife? Will you love her, comfort her, honour and protect her, and forsaking all others, be faithful to her as long as you both shall live? So there's this concept of being faithful and not having any infidelity there. And then many Bible verses that talk about the dangers of adultery. And why would you want to do that? Because Proverbs 31:10, a wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. And Proverbs 19:14, houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. And Proverbs 5, my son, why, my son, be intoxicated with another man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of a wayward woman?
1 Peter 3 verse 7 says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner, and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And Colossians 3:19, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them.
So it talks about loving, comforting, honouring, and you can, it's all very well going, oh yeah, I can love, honour and comfort, but actually you need some tools to be able to do that, because it's not always obvious when someone needs comforting or how to honour them. And that's where communication comes in, because that gives you the tool to know what emotions that person's feeling and how they can express them. So communication is important.
And that's where we come to another part of what's kept our marriage strong, and that is communication. And there's a lot to be said about sitting around the dinner table. We've always sat down to dinner, and it's not just, and it's an opportunity for us as a couple, but it's also really important to instill that in the rest of the family and the children as well, because sitting down at the dinner table is our opportunity to talk to them about their day and to give them that time to tell us about something that's bothering them, or something that they want to celebrate with us, or anything like that. So I think communication isn't just something for couples and for husbands and wives, it's for everybody, it's for all relationships, is spending that time talking and listening to that other person. And listening is quite a key part of communication. I think a lot of people kind of forget that and don't focus on it, and don't give people, the other person, the space to talk. And for Henry and I, one of the things that again, in our relationship and marriage, we had to learn, and that is timing of communication. Everybody knows that kind of, you want to have that difficult conversation. You've got a topic that you need to talk to somebody about, but you want to do it at the right time, because you don't want to upset them too much. You don't want to not have enough time to talk it through. So for Henry and I, we very quickly found Henry is a morning person. This is my lark. I am an owl for definite. So if I chose when I want to talk about something, it will be in the evening. It will be toward the end of the day. That's the best time for me to talk. But I know that's not the time to talk to Henry.
No.
He'd rather be in bed. And Henry knows that if he talks to me before I've had my first cup of coffee, he will get a grumble. And it's not just the coffee, it's the fact that I'm not a morning person. So for us, we discovered that the best time of day for us to talk about anything significant was the middle of the day. And that often meant we didn't talk to each other until weekends, or about the significant things. We do talk to each other, but about the significant things. And early in our marriage, we don't do it as much now as we used to, but early in our marriage, when we had things that we were tense about or causing friction, we have a whiteboard in our kitchen, and we came to a policy of, if you've got something you want to talk about, you put a bullet point on the whiteboard and you write it up on the whiteboard. And then the next time we're going to talk to each other, that's what is on the agenda. So there were no surprises. You didn't suddenly drop something in. It meant that not only had you had the time and space to think about what that topic was and think about what your concerns were, but actually Henry or I, whoever the partner was, would have had that time to think about, well, okay, they've written washing up on the list. Why has she written washing up on the list? Why is that a problem? And you can then look at, well, what's happening during the week and why might that be a problem?
Yeah, so if she wrote it on Tuesday evening, I'd be planning all my defences, and I'd be planning them on Wednesday as well. Like, I do all the washing and I've got no time to do the washing. So I'd be really defensive probably on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. And then by Friday I'd be like, oh, maybe she's got a point. Then on Saturday I'd be, well, I can probably talk about this impartially now because I've had a chance to defend myself mentally.
It works the other way around as well, I'll confess. There were times when he wrote something up on the board and I'm like, but I do that. So, I mean, I've got an example that happened recently. So we sat down and we talked because I said to Henry, I felt like I was the one, because I'm working from home at the moment, I felt I was the one that was always putting the washing on, always putting it on the airer, always putting it to go away. And it was me that was doing all of that housework stuff. And when we talked, there was that kind of, and I was also doing all the cooking. I was doing everything as far as I was concerned, which is a very selfish point of view. But when we talked, Henry was like, well, you're doing all the cooking because you're planning all the meals. I don't know what we're having. I've no idea what you've got. I mean, yes, I write a meal plan and it's up on the fridge, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Henry doesn't mean we share those responsibilities, because in my head, I've written pasta and sauce. But in my head, what I mean is pasta with courgette and onion and tomatoes all cooked together because that's what's in the fridge. But Henry doesn't know that because I've not communicated that. So it's about kind of making sure that you've got that open communication to challenge those assumptions. And it's like the washing. I was putting it in the washing machine, I was putting it on overnight, and then I was putting it on the air in the morning after Henry had taken the kids to work at school. But then I was also having to be the one that was taking it off the air, because by the time I needed to put the next lot on, it was still there. And it was like, well, Henry's saying, well, why did you put the washing machine on overnight? I'm never going to be able to put it on the air if you put it on overnight. And it was talking about where those frictions and problems were coming from. But one of the most important things about that communication was that we were not personal. It's very easy. And when I first went into that conversation, it was very much I always do this, you never do that. And that can lead to tension, that can lead to arguments. Doesn't happen very often between Henry and I, but it can sometimes, especially if it's a personal, I always do this. Another part of emotions, communication is emotions. And when you have that, I always do this, that's when it becomes quite emotive in your conversations. And in the marriage preparation book, and it's something that Henry and I come back to time and time again, is rhinos and hedgehogs. I don't know who's heard of rhinos and hedgehogs. I am a hedgehog. If I have a problem or I'm angry, I curl up. And I'm going to curl up and build it up and build it up. And then all of a sudden, and I'll go ping, and Henry gets spiked.
Well, you also prickly as well when you
like
that. But I'm a hedgehog too. I don't do a charge with anger like a rhino does. So in fact, we both become two prickly animals if we're seething with anger, and we have to know how to deal with that and not.
I kind of get the feeling I get more prickly than he does. But it's also important to recognise that being angry can be justified. It can be the right thing. It can, you being angry doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean that it's not a valid way to feel about that situation. you could be angry because something has happened that you've not talked about, or so it is a valid response. It's how you manage that anger and how you direct that anger that is important. So if you direct that anger and it's I'm angry with you because you did this, that can damage that relationship between husband and wife, or between mother and daughter. That can be where it becomes a problem and becomes a challenge. But if you recognize what you're angry about and deal with it at the earliest opportunity, so the example over the washing and the housework that I was feeling, I recognized that I was starting to feel resentful that I was doing it all, and that was going to build up to frustration and anger. And so I said to Henry, we need to talk. But I said that early enough that I hadn't yet curled up and become prickly, or not too prickly anyway. Right.
Expressing love.
No, we need that bit first. That bit's important.
So during the wedding service, you have the part where the person, the vicar or the pastor, says, will you, the families of Henry and Liz, support and uphold their marriage now and in the years to come? And everyone says, we will.
We looked at our wedding order of service, and it's really big and bold in there.
Yeah.
So any relationship needs to happen in community. It's a lot easier if you've got people who are supporting you. So, for example, we have childcare, so we can have a date night. But it just gives that support. And I think it's important to say that every couple needs encouragement and support, and just
I think it's also a case of having role models as well, to be able to say, well, actually, how does Steve and Sharon deal with that kind of a problem? Or let's go and talk to that couple because we can see they're doing that well. And I think that's really important for couples and for friendships as well, where you've got a challenging a problem within a friendship. It's being able to go and speak to someone and without necessarily disclosing all the information, just kind of say, I'm finding a friendship really difficult because, and being able to be honest to get that support. And also within our marriage, recognizing that sometimes Henry doesn't have the answer for me, and he's not necessarily going to be able to give me the support I need at the time I need it. So there have been occasions where I've said to Henry, I'm going to go and see a friend, and I'll go and see a friend and I'll go and have a coffee and spend an afternoon with them and come back and I'll be a lot better, because whatever it was that was bothering me, I've spoken about with that friend, because I knew that was the right person to go to, and Henry knew that was the right person to go. There have been occasions where Henry's gone, go and talk to, go away. And there have been times where I've kind of gone, look, you haven't spoken to Steve lately, go, and that's his the best man, and I'll send him off to go and have an afternoon with Steve, because we recognise that yes, we can be there for one another, but actually we need other people around us to love us and nurture us so that our marriage is successful.
Yeah.
Right. And the last thing we wanted to look at, and it comes from the marriage preparation book, but I think it's something that's worth thinking about as married couples or as mothers and daughters, those significant relationships in your life. The question in the book is, what 3 ways has your partner expressed love in the past 6 months? And Henry and I on Tuesday night sat down and thought about that, because how you express love can be in lots of different ways. So some of you may be familiar with the love languages of time and words and gifts and
service,
yeah,
and touch.
yeah. But actually, how have you felt loved by your partner, by your parents, by your whoever it might be that you're thinking about? How have they expressed love to you, and how have you expressed love to them? Because to give love is just as important as to receive love, because if you're giving it, it will come back to you in blessings. So my three, I'm going to be honest about this one. My three, Henry bought me a new scrunchie, a small little thing, but it wasn't. He'd gone out and he'd purposely looked at what I bought this cardigan, and Henry kind of gone out and gone, I want to find one that goes with that because Liz looks lovely in that cardigan. I want to go out and kind of compliment that. The other one is I talked earlier about how dog guiding had kind of stopped during lockdown, and I was approached to help out with the rangers over Zoom, and that was a regular kind of Friday night commitment about bedtime, so not really very convenient for us. And Henry was more than happy for me to do that because he knew how important that was to me, and that is love to me. That's showing actually I value what's important to you as much as you value it. And the last one is celebrating with me my dieting, which when I first started, I wasn't too sure about, but actually Henry's brilliant in when I'm doing exercising. He might go, oh, go for it, Liz, you're doing great today. And it might, to some people, that might be really condescending and they might not appreciate it. But actually, when I'm putting the effort in, and like I've got new jeans recently, and it's like him saying to me, you look fantastic in those, but not in such a way that I feel bad about how I looked before. Right. I just feel good about how I look now. And that's what's important.
It was all her motive to do the exercise. I didn't make her do it, just doing it off her own back, which is great because it means I'm not like having to beat her with a stick.
It wouldn't be done if you were beating me with a stick.
I felt very loved by Liz because when lockdown, we did this half-term holiday adventures at home, which is a girl guiding thing where we had lots of activities, and Hannah and Sarah and we all joined in as family, and it was really just felt really good as a family, and I felt really loved that Liz had organised that. And then last few weekends ago, we were going to do some gardening, but at the last minute I said, no, let's fix Sarah's bike. And we put this trailer on the back so that I can tow her around. And it took all afternoon, so we didn't do the gardening. But I was just aware that Liz had compromised and said, I'm happy to change plans. And so I was happy. I felt loved that she could be willing to go with my change of plans and accept that, even though it was just a spur of the moment decision. When I come home from work and I can just offload to Liz and she listens to me when I'm telling her about my day, that feels really good. And when I had a bad day at work, doesn't matter how rubbish or what stupid mistakes I've made, I know that I can always confide in Liz and say, look, I did this. It was a silly thing. I shouldn't have done it. And I feel like an idiot and I don't know how I'm going to tell anyone else, but I can always tell Liz because we can share those things. So that knowing that I've got that person is really important.
So hopefully through everything we've talked about, you can kind of see the vows of the marriage vows lived out in practice in our last 10 years. And I hope and pray that it'll be many, many years to come. But is it 50 years, Catherine and Gordon? No.
Yeah, I think it is
50. Yeah, we're off to London in August to join Henry's family to celebrate the.
No, it must be 40 years. No, it must be 45.
What colour is it? Is it golden?
Yeah, golden.
Golden wedding anniversary of his aunt and uncle over in London. So I mean, I think that's a really significant and important thing to kind of recognise, is actually marriage is a long-term commitment, and it takes effort. It's not something that just trundles along and you don't have to worry about and it's always going to be there. It does take effort, it does take time, it does take commitment, and it is important to invest in it. I think that's the one thing that during the last 10 years we've done quite well, and the times when we've not been investing in it are the times when it's been difficult, and I've certainly recognised that, and so I kind of recommend to everybody just spending that time to invest in those significant relationships in your life, because that's where they will be built and become stronger. And it applies to parents and children as well. I mean, we have times where we recognise the need to invest in each of our children individually. So back when lockdown started to ease, we purposely said, right, Hannah is going to go over to Granny's house and we're going to have Sarah for a day, and we will do something that is Sarah orientated. Can't remember what we did, but it was all about her. It was all about what she wanted to do and what she was interested in. And we did the opposite. And Sarah went to Nanny's house and Hannah had the day with us, and we went for a massive long cycle ride, which if Sarah had been with us, we wouldn't have been able to achieve. But it's that kind of, you're important, you're valued, that is really kind of worth putting the effort and the time into.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll pray. Father God, we thank you that we are loved by you and that we are part of your family and that you live in us, and that we can have relationships with other people and we can love just like you love. And this week, help us to draw upon your spirit, and you help us to love those around us, and to give us the tools so we can express our love to other people. Amen.